Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. This is part 4 of 5 for my video series on my Game of the Year, Clair Obscure Expedition 33. Part 1 was an introduction explaining all of this, Part 2 was ranking the party narratively with tons of spoilers, Part 3 was an overview of the combat system and ranking the party mechanically and then overall, but without the spoilers, and this is ranking most of the boss fights. The next video will wrap it all up with spoiler-filled analysis of the game's themes and messages, concluding in a spoiler-free discussion on how the game stacks up as I rank it on my gigantic ranked list of hundreds of games. But we're here for bosses today. Since I covered the combat mechanics in the last video, I'll be discussing these fights on the assumption that you at least have some idea of what's going on and how fights work. So that way we can focus on just the bosses, in the interest of time, because I'm ranking a lot of them. 24 of them, actually. It's not quite all of it, because there's some optional ones I didn't really get to experience until I went back to them in the post-game and was way over-leveled, and basically one-shot them. So I have no idea what their actual mechanics are, or if they even have them, making them pretty impossible to rank. So that means, of the ones I'm ranking, coming in 24th place is Glaze. I want to be clear that every boss in this game has something cool going on, and there's loads of great fight designs. Some of them can feel a little samey at times, but none of them outright suck. Unfortunately for Glaze, this actually is one of those bosses I went back and fought over-leveled, but I did get to at least see some of the fight. Most of its attacks are pretty straightforward, and it's definitely a boss that if you meet it at its level, you need to prepare properly for, because it has a lot of elemental resistance and even absorbs earth damage, healing it instead. It clearly has something interesting it does, though, since the turn before I killed it, there was a warning about a powerful blow. So maybe there's something really cool there, but I couldn't tell you what exactly it is. I assume it's a really hard-hitting attack that takes a turn to charge up, which not many things actually do in this game, so that's at least interesting. Coming in 23rd place is the very first actual boss fight of the game, Yvette. It's a gigantic spellcaster dude, and is the first encounter that makes you actually care about executing game mechanics properly. In addition to dealing with the boss's attacks, which are admittedly pretty easy to deal with, though not in this footage, because I hadn't really learned the timing of stuff yet, and hey, it was the beginning of the game. It summons additional enemies that from the zone you take down, or let them keep attacking you, so you have more stuff to parry and farm action points, if you want to do it that way. The fight is very, very simple, which makes sense considering it's the first boss fight. But what I really do like about this fight, and the reason that it's ranked above Glaze at least, is that it's the first encounter to really emphasize the scale of the threats the expedition faces, and narratively it works very well to throw something that makes me feel, at the time, helpless, but also, like, maybe we can actually pull this thing off.
For those who come after,
22nd place is Go Blue. This guy's got a lot of narrative importance that I feel like is one of the only plot threads they didn't entirely close. Maybe they just ran out of time, but it asked the important questions to get the ball rolling on a few ideas, so it still worked. Mechanically, it's pretty cool. While it cares a lot about the flowers and the veil you find it in, it grows more as enemies you can fight, and if you don't kill them in time, they'll heal the boss a ton. It's pretty easy to manage that, but it's a neat fight narratively early in the game and starts to emphasize how you'll need to think differently about some fights and prioritize things on a per-fight basis. 21st is the Mimes. I don't know where they came from. I don't know how they have hairstyles for the party. I don't actually understand anything about them, but they are cool. These are hidden fights with cosmetic rewards throughout the entire world of Clair Obscure, and the first one I found was also the first fight I ran into where I really needed to care about the break meter, because it starts the game with a huge damage reduction barrier. They only have a couple attack patterns, but it's some of the more interesting ones, especially compared to the early game, where most of the rhythms are pretty syncopated. These ones have really oddball rhythms. Weather that storm until you can break them once, stunning them for several turns and getting rid of their barrier for the rest of the fight. I felt like my first mime was going to be unbeatable until I broke it and pulled off a crazy wombo combo for the first time, which also got me an achievement for my L, so hooray. Coming in 20th place is Obscur, an optional fight leading up to a huge story boss. It's the first time that I ran into the curse mechanic, a Doom-like countdown of turns until a character automatically dies, and it's got great big sweeping cinematic attacks that you have to really learn how to dodge. Thankfully, it's not that hard to do so, but it's still critical. Apart from being a really great enemy design visually with a unique gimmick, Obscur does an excellent job in teaching you the mechanics of another fight we'll get to, creating narrative cohesion as you progress through the dungeon, which I like. Which brings us to 19th place, Glissando. This is the other boss leading up to the same one that Obscur teases, and also showcases elements of the bigger fight so you can learn them a little ahead of time. This time, we're learning about the charm mechanic, which for fellow Final Fantasy heads is confusion. A charmed character will attack its allies instead of taking their normal turn, but since the Glissando is a giant rattlesnake, you can disrupt the charm by doing free shots on its rattle. This is one of the most inspired fight designs in the entire game, and the rattle is a great one-shot mechanic that utilizes the most flexible tool in the game's combat toolbox of mechanics? Well, yeah. But it's really a one-trick pony and otherwise a very easy and simple fight, so it loses points for that. 18th place is one of my favorite enemy designs visually, Creation. It has some crazy bodyguards, and all of them have this void element to their design that I love, and there's plot significance, but Creation does massive sweeping attacks you need to dodge. But more importantly, when it drops to, I think it's below half health, it flies up into the air and gains a ton of shields, and gains a whole new toolkit. That being said, while the fight was visually very cool, it did feel a little too easy. It's possible I had been overleveled for it, but that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy the whole thing. It's a very cool fight.
Another dance.
Coming now in 17th is the best one-trick gimmick in the whole game, Burgian. This fight is very simple and exceptionally cool. It's this great big towering Nevron with a huge mouth, and that last part is important because it eats someone. We go on a vor adventure. Alright, you're doing most of this fight with 2 people out of a 3-person party. The only way to get that party member back is to fill and demolish the break meter, causing the Burgian's tummy to get a little upset, and it's important to get that person back because its attacks can be a lot to deal with. It may even have been a little unfair to call this a one-trick fight because it does have another thing. It has a spit attack that every hit applies exhaust to the target, which negates any action point gains, and if you get hit by too many of those, it's going to be a real struggle to perform any meaningful actions before you just get out-muscled and killed. A truly awesome fight with a hilarious mechanic. And speaking of funny fights, 16th place is Golgra, the leader of the Gestrels. She's always on your side, but like most of her kind, she sure does love to fight, and that's why you could fight her a ton of different times. So I want to be clear that while you can fight her at an earlier point in the game, it's totally optional and she's holding back there. This is the real Golgra fight, where she's actually trying against you, so it's the one that matters to me. She hits hard. While there's a little nuance to it, most of her attacks are pretty direct, but there's a lot of them, and they are fast. Getting good at parrying, and the fight will go smoothly. But if you don't, especially after she goes Super Saiyan, and you'll die a horrible, painful death. Just good, clean, painful fun, the way Gestural God intended. Wow. 15th place is a big story boss, Visages. This is the first fight against something truly outrageously larger than me, and I've got to say, that feels great. That being said, you're really attacking this mirror in front of you. It has different masks on it that will change every once in a while, causing it to do different attacks. There's sweeping damage debuffs, and one of them also gives itself shields for every successful hit. The cinematic qualities of some of this game's fights are really unparalleled, and the varied attack patterns from the different masks feel excellent. I felt really dumb that I didn't think to shoot the glowing bits in the mirror until I was almost done with the fight though, but this is an absolutely gorgeous fight, and while each mask is different, they're ultimately not individually that exciting mechanically, as it's generally a highly telegraphed handful of attacks at the whole party with a different buff or debuff is what sets them apart. Coming in 14th place is Serpent Fair, a great big optional mega boss that looms over the world map. It's enormous, it's flying in the air, you can see it like the whole game. This is another visually stunning boss fight, and this time with one of the coolest twists the game has to offer. It's basically a dragon sky serpent type monster made in part out of buildings. It's super cool, but what it does that's really neat mechanically is it periodically absorbs all of your AP, meaning that it can be a challenge to build up to big attacks. Thankfully, by the time I went and fought this guy, my team was already built in a way that I can gain a ton of AP every turn, and since I had the Cheater Lumina on everyone, a bit of a misnomer if you ask me, it's kind of required, it's not cheating. Letting people take 2 turns every time they have a turn, it was easy to build up for at least 1 good turn on each person. But absorbing AP also meant that it was immune to shooting damage, which is something I did not realize right away, so mistakes were made. Ultimately, Serpent Fair offers absolutely no narrative benefit, and this may be because I was probably overleveled a little bit, but none of its attacks felt especially insane, but a lot of them sure were pretty, and combined with its unique AP absorption mechanic, it makes for one of the more memorable fights in the game overall, which is good for being a giant scary thing flying around the world map taunting you the entirety of the game, and also being one of the handful of ways to get the items you need to upgrade a weapon to maximum level, because it takes a lot. 13th place is Lamp Master, one of the first really epic boss fights in the game, at least chronologically, featuring multiple health bars and newly heightened stakes. I won't get into it here, but it's also paired with one of the greatest scenes in the whole game, which I think earns it some major bonus points. The first phase is pretty simple, with the boss hitting fairly hard, but not doing anything extraordinary. It's the second phase, however, that makes this an epic fight with more varied attack patterns and doing cool stuff with the lamps and its giant sword. It's cool. This is one of the absolute best enemy designs visually, and the events surrounding Lampmaster make the fight hold a special place in my heart, and we're not even in the top 10 yet. Coming in 12th place is the other part of the sequence from Lampmaster. It's impossible to talk about this fight without at least mentioning one of the biggest spoilers in the game. So if you're wanting to avoid those, pause the video, go to the timestamps in the description, and jump to 11th. Still here? Alright. 12th place is the fight against Renoir at Stonewave Cliffs, Gustave's last stand. As people have discovered with actually perfect play and New Game Plus with crazy stacked builds, it is impossible, in fact, to win this fight. But that won't stop me from trying my hardest every single time, even though I know the outcome. Even though Gustave will lose this fight and Gustave will die, I'm gonna drag it out and I'm gonna cry about it. Mechanically, there's nothing to the fight, really, because, it's predetermined. But narratively, it's absolutely flawless. Hey, I hope you liked our trip through the woo zone at number 12, because 11th place is all about the wee.
Rankathon used to be all wee, but now is all
Ultimate Sakapatat, love saying that word, Sakapatat, is a really cool gestural mech thing that you're forced to fight for the gestrals to trust you. It took some trial and error to really learn his moves, but it was very worth it in the end. There's a wide variety of attacks, and this is one of the first fights that I had to try several times to beat it, but it was very rewarding to get over this hump. In addition to all of his crazy attacks, he's got this great big shield, and if you stun him, he does lower it, leaving his shoulder exposed. And then you can shoot the glowing spot on his shoulder a ton, and you'll destroy the arm, changing the fight to be against more of a barbarian than a stalwart defender. This whole sequence made this one of the most memorable fights mechanically to me, and it is still really fun to just parry all of those cannon fire shots. It's a fun fight. It's really fun. And here we are, finally cracking the top 10. Coming in 10th place is Dueliste. This is an incredible fight with multiple health bars, great story moments, and being set in a pit of corpses on your way to some very important story stuff that I won't spoil here, makes this one of the most exciting fights in the game, stakes-wise. Not the most, of course, but it's up there. Mechanically, Dueliste has very punishing attack patterns that are both interesting and varied. The mixture of regular dodges and jump dodges and gradient counters woven throughout the flurries of blows is exciting and definitely rewarding when you get it right. It's an absolute whirlwind of damage, and I especially love the attack that spawns the little Reaper guy, which I definitely claimed for Minoko as soon as I could. This fight is the blueprint for what a great Expedition 33 fight is. And it's also how I got my favorite weapon for Verso, so thank you, Dueliste, for dying. Coming in 9th place is the second fight against Renoir, and it's just another incredible fight. This time we really take a good smack at the guy, seeing what he's really capable of, but more importantly, he starts to see what we are really capable of. The stakes have, up until this point, never been higher. Emotions are intensified, the attack patterns are exciting, and importantly, exceptionally cinematic. There's clues to things yet to come in this fight, like the masks, and the healing ads introduce a very interesting wrinkle that was a painful lesson for me. But mostly, we're getting teasers of some of the biggest fights left to go in the game, a pivotal story moment, and the introduction to one of the best musical themes in this whole game, filled with incredible music. And this is how I got what wound up being my favorite weapon for my L. But as cool as this fight against Renoir is, he ultimately gets away, and we won't see him again until my 8th favorite fight in Expedition 33. Coming in at number 8 is Renoir again. This time, it's when we reach the monolith and are getting ready to finally fight the paintress. We have to get through him one more time to reach our goal. This takes every aspect of the last fight against him and turns it up a bit. The music, while the same melodically, has vocals layered on. The attacks are harder, crazier, and in every sense of the word, more. He can vanish people. My yell was gone. This isn't like the Bergian where I can get her back. She's just gone for the entire rest of the fight, and I have to soldier on. And did I mention the awesome Lightning Lion that supercharges him to take twice as many actions? Yeah, amazing fight.
That's more like it.
Seventh place is Cyrene, one of the few enormous bosses called Axons. This is another extremely cinematic epic fight with high stakes. The camera moves around a bit during the fight, making for really interesting attack patterns, and also keeps you in mind the sense of scale involved and how massive everything is. This is the fight that Tissur and Glissando were preparing you for, and this time around, the charm attack is brutal, because you don't get to just shoot the rattle to make it stop. It's there. This boss has a ton of different attacks you need to learn, especially when the final act begins, and she summons a bunch more enemies you need to simultaneously deal with. Narratively, I think the other fight it's paired with, it's a little cooler, but we'll get to that one later, even though I do like the mechanics of this one probably a little more. Did I say later? I meant right now. Coming in 6th place is Mask Keeper, another Axon, and the continuation of the Visages fight. There's 3 masks behind the Keeper, and he rotates through them, with each one doing something different. One makes him attack again, one heals him, and one nerfs the party. This is a long fight with a lot to keep on top of, and the Mask Keeper is capable of putting out a ton of damage. Partway through the fight, he even gains a permanent ability to gain a shield for every time he damages anybody in your party, and that stacks if multiple people are hit at the same time. You really, absolutely need to get very good at dodging, or even better, parrying his attacks. Even if you have something that can cut through all of his shields, you'll probably lose the war of attrition if you're trying to chip away with the healing and nerfing going on in the background. And all of this is without getting into the narrative importance of the fight, making it truly one of the top hero encounters in this whole game. If you want to see me dive into that aspect of the fight, you'll want to check out my video ranking the party members narratively, where I talk about CL in that section, which you can find linked in the description of this video. Before starting the top 5 fights of Clair Obscure Expedition 33, I need to give a more proper spoiler warning. These are the biggest, best, and most intense fights the game has to offer, and it's really difficult to talk about them without getting into spoiler territory, so if you're looking to avoid that, this might be a good place to stop. They're all incredible fights, and ranking them was quite difficult, and trust me when I say that the build up to each of them is definitely worth the payoff, making them one of the crowning achievements of this incredible game. But for those of you that don't mind spoilers or have already beaten the game, onward we go. Coming in 5th place is Painted Love. One of the optional things you can do in the post-game, if you want, is a zone called the Endless Tower. It's basically one great big boss rush with 33 encounters that you just fight in order, which not only makes it a great source of experience and money, but also creates some interesting mixtures of fights you'd never otherwise see. We're talking several bosses fighting alongside each other against you in fascinating combinations that require different prioritization of mechanics as you balance everything happening all at once. This culminates in Painted Love, which is the last fight in the tower, and is basically part of the 2 biggest story bosses teaming up against you with a shared health pool despite being separate bodies that take their own turns. It's one of the harder fights in the game for sure, and showcases a ton of attacks from throughout the story. It is a great fight. However, it was still a little disappointing to me, which is why despite it being so mechanically incredible, it's, quote, only in 5th place. It lacked any narrative payoff, unlike some of the other post-game mega bosses that I'll talk about, and was also missing the most impressive attacks from both of the bosses that it's based on. And ultimately, while it did offer some challenging moments, I do wish it was a little bit harder, which is how I feel about most, though certainly not all, of the post-game elements to Expedition 33 in regards to design. You can make numbers bigger, which is what changing the difficulty setting in the game and turning on the challenge options does, but that does not make encounter design harder. Considering the lengths to which you can break the game's combat in half with the right Pictos and Lumina, I just really want this to be insanely difficult. That's not to say that the fight was especially easy or anything, but being the last fight in the tower made me anticipate it being harder than it was, but it's still incredibly good, and was a delightful little surprise to see those two characters team up to cap that area off, which is why it ranked this highly. Coming in 4th place is the actual last boss in the game's story. Beat this and you roll credits. Well, there's one more fight technically after this, but I don't consider that to be a boss fight, as it's more just a narrative exercise. And if you want to see that, you can check out my narrative ranking video, or once it's out, my finale video, where I'll have some more thoughts on this again. The fight kicks off after some big dialogue, and Renoir's not holding back this time. His combat music is back, bigger and crazier than ever, to match the energy of this fight.
Monoko, Harry!
Oops, I'm back.
He's opening black holes, he's blasting you with crazy energy, he pretty much one-shot Monoko. Thankfully I have the once per fight auto-revive Picto on him. Then, when you get him below half health, he summons the Axons again to join the fight. Disappointingly, you're not actually fighting them alongside him, however. They're mostly doing support stuff or some extra attacks for you to dodge in the background, but they are in the background. If we just started truly layering these bosses on top of each other, I'm sure this would be my favorite fight of the game, but it's not quite there. But wait, there's more! Just when it looks like you've got to beat Cyrene, one of the Axons heals him to full health, and you get some more crazy plot stuff, and then you're back to the fight. The Axons are, we'll say, being dealt with, but Renoir has powered himself up again. He's got more tricks up his sleeves, attacks faster, attacks harder, and is much tankier. But eventually, he unleashes some of the coolest, most cinematic attacks in the game, and that is saying a lot, because there's a lot of really cool cinematic attacks in this game.
Not this time!
Coming in 3rd place is the last member of the Descender family we wind up meeting, Clair, who is also perhaps the most powerful. This isn't actually her though, but rather a manifestation of her. This is an optional post-game boss, but unlike Serpent Fair and Painted Love, it's got a bunch of other narrative things to unpack. I'll dive into that a little more in my final video covering Expedition 33, but the short version here is we learn the source of the Nevrons, why they exist, and why some of them are relatively friendly. Merely getting to Clair is a bit of an adventure that's tons of fun, but once you're there, the fight is definitely a memorable one. Unfortunately, I was probably a little over-leveled for it, so it was over quicker than it probably should have been. I look forward to my eventual replay of the game on New Game Plus with all of the difficulty boosts turned up, but what does she do? Well, as the origin point of the Nevrons, she throws Nevrons at you. More than any other fight in the game, there's a huge variety of attacks to deal with, and you have to adapt to them in rapid succession. Each time she does an attack, there's a sequence of several different Neverons that spawn, attack once or twice, and then comes the next one, and they come so quickly, sometimes I can't even see which ones are coming until I have to react to it. This fight is, I think, one of, if not, the best implementations of having 3 different versions of dodging or parrying all in one system. Oh, and she can delete your party members forever, because one of the attacks is the consume attack from the Burgian, except then it disappears and you can't break it to get them back. And that's just one of the many cool things that Clair does, and we'll feel very familiar with some parts of it as we talk about our next boss. Coming in second place is the ultimate optional boss in Clair Obscure Expedition 33, Simone. This may not be my favorite boss fight in the game, but it's absolutely the hardest, and it is not remotely close. We'll start with, I love a crazy guy with a big-ass sword, and Simone is crazy. He's buried deep, deep below the monolith in an area called the Abyss, and is the actual only thing down there. There's some other story stuff with him and Clair that'll expand on in the finale video, but while I'll say his story is not necessarily all that important, it is cool. Simone hits hard and has a ton of health. If you don't dodge his attacks and don't do something to weaken him or buff your defenses, he will kill you in 1 or 2 hits. I had heard a lot about this guy leading up to it, and while the fight seemed pretty cool, it wasn't as hard as I expected. And then there was another cutscene leading to the start of Phase 2. Simone's second phase is the absolute hardest thing you'll run into in this game, I promise. I know there's ways to cheese it, with someone I was talking to having one-shot him with the right Lumina and Pictos setup before Simone could even take a turn. That's one of the appeals of Expedition 33's combat system, after all, is that you can see into the Matrix, break it in half, and bend the game to your will, which can certainly be a fun puzzle, but if you want to beat the fight in a more fair manner, you have a lot to deal with here. To kick things off, whenever Simone starts his turn, he steals any shields any of your characters have, so if you've been relying on a strategy of stacking shields on the whole party, which is something, for example, Mael excels at, that's right out. Then, his attacks are fast and hard. After losing to Phase 2 a couple of times, I decided I will never get the parries down, and instead tried my best to mitigate damage via debuffs and Lumina, while dodging as many of the attacks as I can. Yes, I won't get the AP because of the dodging, but at least I'll live. One of the disappointing things about the fight is that losing in Phase 2 does mean you need to do Phase 1 again, and it's kind of long, which makes restarting a time-intensive process, unlike basically every other fight in this game where you just get, yeah, we'll try again, and you're right in it. Also, unlike every other part of this game, once you're in Phase 2, if at the start of his turn there's any dead party members, he erases them. They're gone. Can't revive them. While other fights have some form of this mechanic, they are rare, generally only happening to 1, maybe 2 characters. He checks for it every single turn. That hinders a lot of other strategies too. Oh, and did I mention that he'll periodically set someone's health just to 1, doesn't matter how much they had, and you cannot dodge that? The Lumina that heals someone to full if they haven't been dealt damage since their last turn did a lot of heavy lifting for me, because setting their health to 1 is not technically getting hit with an attack. But as you learn Phase 2 and learn how to mitigate some of the craziness that Simone dishes out, like that Lumina I mentioned, it becomes manageable if you just keep up with him. Until he hits his third and final phase. Below a certain percentage of health, I'm not totally sure what it is, maybe it's 25% or 30%, but Simone will do a crazy, unavoidable cinematic that just erases your entire starting party, forcing you to send in your reserves to finish the job. Unfortunately for me, my reserves were simply not up to snuff to do this legit when I was recording, so I needed to do some grinding and get a bunch more Lumina points for them before I eventually beat this guy, which I did. I found a spot that I could grind 100 Lumina points per hour and really load it up on things. But this is essentially the fight that you're seeing, even though I'm not able to show you the victory screen. I look forward to the day when I'm on New Game +++ or something, and I have 1,000 Lumina points on every character, and I can beat Simone on the hardest difficulty mode with challenge settings turned on. That includes a 100 times health multiplier, by the way. But that's a long ways from now, and I still have one more boss that I liked even more than this one to talk about.
Ready to parry.
The absolute best boss of Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is, of course, the Paintress. She is the big bad and the reason the expeditions were formed. Based on the story up until this point, it's implied this should be the end of the game. I'm sorry to spoil that it's not. Everything leading up to this is magical. You run through the monoliths, speedrunning areas. You've already been in a crazy boss rush to climb to the top, where what was built up as a monumental, epic moment turns depressing as you see the torment of the Paintress, her pain, her sorrow, her grief, as she's slowly losing her mind, which then turns to righteous fury when she realizes some of you are not who they claim. That's all great and already makes this a top-tier fight, but it's also mechanically and visually remarkable. The Paintress offers a huge array of attacks with a variety of patterns. She's got tons of health, a second health bar, and when you get to the back half, having what we originally thought was the Paintress join the fight and start literally ripping reality apart while fighting on SKA's back in this grandiose cinematic marvel of a fight. Well, it's not the hardest fight, actually not even close when you factor in post-game revamped versions of many bosses and of course hidden stuff like Simone. It is certainly a proper challenge when you take it on at its intended level range, of course without having even earned the break damage limit Pictos yet, as you near the completion of the story. She throws curse on people, you get a countdown to their death, she does massive damage, she heals, and with everything the game has had to offer riding upon this moment, especially her third health bar when she is on the ground dying and doing everything she can to help and protect your party to prepare them for what comes after. She has fittingly earned the top spot as my favorite boss fight in Clair Obscure Expedition 33, is the pinnacle of both mechanical and narrative delivery for my game of the year. And there we are. I'm done ranking things inside this game, and the only thing left to do is rank it against other games. So join me next time as I conclude my series for this incredible game, breaking down themes and messages with a little tinfoil hat work of my own, before seeing just how high this thing will go on my great big list of hundreds of games ranked against each other. There will be comparisons, there will be bold claims, there might even be a little bit of crying, who knows. I haven't finished that video yet, so even I don't know. But thank you for watching. I truly appreciate everyone that's been sticking around through this series and through everything else I've been doing. The countdown last year, everything since finishing the countdown. I do want to mention that I'll be back on Old Gamer's Almanac in some upcoming episodes, so keep an eye on Hunter and the gang over there as well. But that's all I've got today. So thank you and have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.
My creations against me?